industry. Well, that's convenient. Thank you very much, Tim. And finally, we have Oriel Davis-Lyons. Oriel used to be a chef, but after getting tired of the long hours and intense pressure, he decided to get into advertising. He started his career in New Zealand at Colenso BBDO, and in 2015 made the move to New York, where he worked at Arch as GA and Droga 5 before joining Spotify. He has won over 100 awards across every major show, and his work often uses non-traditional approach to highlight social issues like creating a partnership between Amnesty International and AdBlock to protest online censorship, or a campaign to put graphic warning labels on boxes of ammunition to address gun violence in America. He is also the founder and head of One School, the first free online portfolio program for Black creatives in an attempt to address systemic barriers to entry in the advertising industry. He lives in upstate New York with his family. I'm going to put in the link tree and LinkedIn for our panelists in the chat. And if our panelists could start us off with answering the questions of what inspires the work you do and what promoted you to pursue your career. And if we could start off with John, I think, who was talking just now.
Awesome. I thought I'd jump in first. Hi, guys. Thank you for having me here. Shout out to Brandon and Maya. I've worked with them previously on a project. Good to see you again. Yeah, I'll jump in. What inspired me or the work I do? I think it's craft and particularly screen printing. I have a real love of creating work or work that's created by hand. That's been a big passion for me. And what I love about it is the process of it, getting my hands dirty, the smell of the inks, all of these kind of craft-based stuff, the textures, the imperfections, the mistakes, everything around that is something I've had a real passion for. So much so that even though I run a design agency now, at the heart of my studio is a screen printing press. You'll see behind me here is our exposure unit as well. So that's followed me everywhere I go, because I just love the tactile nature of getting your hands dirty and seeing your work kind of with that, those, as I mentioned earlier, those imperfections within the designs. Should I jump onto the second one, what prompted me to pursue this career? I think initially it was all about seeing my work as big as possible out in the world, and getting people to interact with it, to see to it, to respond to it. I've always been actually using the screen print process. At the start of my career, as I was still a student, I would find the largest bits of paper and screen print on those. And I would go around all the streets of London and just fly post to those all across different buildings. Again, just for the love of design, just for the love of seeing my work out there and getting people to respond to it. And it's actually through that process is what, how my business was founded and how it built its reputation in London. And now it's grown to an agency of maybe 40 people in New York and 10 people in London. So that was my initial passion for getting into the creative field. I'm going to bat it over to Oriel.
Cheers, John. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so what inspires the work I do? I guess it kind of changes. It's changed throughout my career. I think generally I'm always looking for kind of new inspiration. I think at the moment in my job at Spotify, I'm directly inspired by music, right? That's every day my briefs are about how do we get the world to discover great music on Spotify. And so for me, that's great because music has always been kind of my number one passion. I had dreams of being a musician at some point, and now I get to kind of combine that passion with my day job. So I get very inspired by just kind of listening to a lot of music and coming up with ideas that help people discover it on Spotify. My other inspiration really right now as well is to do with one school, which is, you know, the purpose of getting more Black creatives, young Black creatives into the advertising, the creative side of the advertising industry and design industries. That is, you know, both an inspiration and a purpose that I get a lot from, seeing, you know, people who've graduated, my students who've graduated now in jobs, gives me a lot of inspiration. Getting to speak to them every week and kind of see how, I guess, a next generation, the generation that we're passing the creative baton to, is going to take it and run with it, is very inspiring. So those two things, I think, my main inspirations at the moment. And then what got me into, or what kind of started my creative journey, or the reason I got in, it was a little bit of desperation. I had a lot of different jobs. As Brandon was saying, I used to be a chef. I hated every minute of it. Before that, I had worked on construction sites. You know, I'd worked in retail. My first job was at McDonald's. Like I did everything. I'd been in factories, and I think that's kind of what makes me appreciate the job I do have now, right? Because at the time, I was really looking for something. I was looking for more than just a job. I was looking for something that allowed me to be who I was, and use the interest that I have, and also provide me a career as well. So yeah, I feel very fortunate to have found the work that I do.
And last but certainly not least, Idayat, if you could answer those questions, or do you need me to repeat those for you?
Yeah, and I apologize if I'm going in and out. Connection is acting out. So what inspires the work I do is my community, the world around me, and also like my personal experiences. And the fact that I can make an impact in someone's life just by sharing my gifts and my talents, and just being of service in some way. And what promoted me to pursue my career was the ability to work for myself, and have a sense of ownership, and also be free to do the things that I felt like brought me the most joy. And I'm always ready to learn new things and just be in new spaces that I was not used to. After I graduated college and after working for a company that I was not happy with, my perspective on life began to change, and I promised myself that I would never put myself in a space where like I wasn't happy, or where I felt like I wasn't being my full self. And I wanted to take control of my destiny and not rely on spaces to like, you know, that placed me in a box and limit what my potentials were. So being a creative entrepreneur, I'm able to manage my businesses. I'm able to make time to tap into my creative ventures, you know, bring my creative ideas to life, and also make time for the things I care about, which are my friends, my family, my partner, and also myself. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So I guess now we can just hop into our main questions. Uh, you can answer all, you can answer whichever ones you feel like. It's all up to you. So our first question is, what's something you wish you knew before pursuing your career? Think I'll have Oriel start us off. Oh, if you want to go, then please, by all means. No, because like it looked like you wanted to start us off.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'll be quick. I think don't try and spend too much time working in a style that isn't you, or doesn't come naturally to you, right? I think the first kind of couple of years of my career, I did spend a lot of time trying to mimic people's styles, like my bosses, my managers, who said, you know, like, you should do it more like this, or you should look at this work and like, this is what's best. And for me, it was always me trying to fit in to a style that had come from a different tradition, right? A place with different influences, different cultural references. And then it was only like really later in my career that I kind of thought, you know what, like I am gonna create the things that I feel like express me and who I am, and kind of bring together the things that I like, no matter how maybe weird or niche they are, or even if my direct kind of superior doesn't necessarily get it. I want to put forward stuff that I would be proud to see out in the world. And I think that that's a big lesson that I wish I had probably learned a little earlier, because it would have saved me some stress and some self-doubt at the beginning of my career.
Thank you, Oriel. It looks like Idayat's connection is a bit off. So
what do I wish I knew? I think it's okay.
Apologize for or not, you know, and some.
I was going to say, I think it's okay to fail. Failures, I think, is an important part of it. In some ways, I would encourage it, and that's something I did do. I had to kind of learn through the process. But from the failure, I think that within that space is where you make most of your learnings as well. And you actually go on to do bigger and better things. I'll give you an example of that. Many years ago, I think I moved to New York in 2004 from London. But when I was still in London, I started a screen printing, a t-shirt company as well. We produced a mass amount of t-shirts, and then we started to kind of try ship them at markets. We tried to sell them at trade shows, and no one was buying any of the t-shirts at all. And we spent I think I must have spent about £8,000 to £10,000 on the production of it and paying for the trade shows and stuff. And I got a lot of press from the designs I did on the t-shirt, and actually got featured in some magazines, some trade magazines. But I don't think at any of the trade shows I would sell one shirt. And at the markets, I started off trying to sell them for £15 at the time. I had to reduce it to £5 just to sell a few. But what happened of it, on the back of it, was in the trade show magazines, it got picked up by someone working in the US for Sean John, Puff Daddy. And he was working on the Sean John label at the time. He wanted to do his own thing. He had seen our designs in this magazine, and he had said, "Can you come and do these designs for me?" So we ended up being the creatives, creating all of these designs for a clothing company. You're probably too young now, but it got really big in the US. It was called Artful Dodger as well, and a lot of the hip hop stars started wearing it. It was featured in a lot of music videos. And then maybe 10 years ago, Jay-Z came on board and brought the company outright as well. So on the back of that failure, and thinking that all our money had gone down the drain, success came out of it. So never be fair. If that's one lesson I wish I knew beforehand, because there was a lot of stressful days and months spent on creating the work and thinking it was a failure, as actually you learn from those mistakes.
Brendan, you're on mute.
of course I'm on mute. Sorry about that. Thank you, John. Thank you, Oriel. If Idayat's connection is fixed later on, maybe we can get her answer to that question. But until then, why don't we just move on to the next one? That would be, what's something anyone interested in your field should be prepared for?
I'll lead on this one. That's all right. I would say how isolated the industry can be for Black and brown creatives. I've been in this industry from when I formed the company 20 years ago now, and even now I find myself still the only person of color in these meeting rooms, with other agencies, with other brands as well. So it's a quite isolated space. You don't often have people in the room that have the same experiences as you. But as much as that can be an issue, and it's important to acknowledge it, I think it's important And the advice I would give is to move on from it very quickly, because it's important that you are confident and brave within those spaces. You share your opinions, you share your experiences, because the industry needs it. And we've clearly seen that over the years across many different categories, how the industry makes very wrong mistakes, makes wrong steps as well. So I think it's important that we're in these rooms and in these spaces as Black and brown people. And on the back of that, we are hyper creative. The industry needs us. We are awesome creatives as well. So they need to tap into our expertise as well. We need to be paid for our expertise within these spaces as well, because it's super important. So that was one thing that I learned along the way. It took me a little bit to find the confidence and to find my voice. But now within those spaces, I know it's important that I never stop talking, and I keep talking about my experiences, and I keep talking about my backgrounds, because I know it's super important.
Thank you, John. And so, Idayat, if you would prefer, you can type your answers to these questions in the chat and I can read them aloud for you. Oriel, do you want to take a go at this question?
Sure. I was going to say, you should be prepared, to collaborate on everything, right? I think when I was starting out, I probably saw myself as more of a solo creative, me against the world, and everyone else was out to just kind of make my idea worse. And, I think that's just partly how you are at the beginning of your career, maybe a little bit, you've got more to prove. I think when my work really got better was when I realized that actually working with people, working with great talented people and letting them do what they do, and not, trying to impose your own taste on everyone, is how you get to much better work, like much more interesting stuff, right? In that you're filling the gaps in your own knowledge, right? I think being open to collaboration, not being too protective of your ideas, and being selective. I don't think it means collaborate with anyone. Some people are rubbish, but you find good people and then you let them do what they do, right? And for me, that's kind of what I enjoy most now is really just finding like great people. Like John and I have collaborated on some great stuff, that like the experience of collaboration is almost as good and as fun as the thing that you get out of it. And I think that took a bit of time to learn, but I think you will get further quicker with better results if you are more open to collaboration earlier in your career.
Thank you, Oriel. Looks like Idayat is still having some technical difficulties. All good. We're going to push through. Hopefully, we'll be able to get some answers to these questions from her later on. So, next question. What are your most important tips for choosing a creative career?
I guess I can.
I'll go. I'll start this. So I'm sorry, guys. I've been in and out connection
Cool.
once again. So my most important tips for choosing a creative career will be to just know what it is that you're passionate about, and just think about what your interests are, what your values are, what your skills are, and your preferences as well. And explore the options that are available to you. Use the resources around you, and ensuring that your work fits your personal needs. And just study the people that are in your field that you look up to. See what it is that they're doing and what spaces that they're filling up, and explore those spaces and see if it's something that's for you and not for you. You don't know unless you try. So, and also take your strengths and apply them to your everyday life, and, work on your weaknesses and make them strengths as well. Don't ignore any part of yourself. So that's what I would say.
I'll jump in on this one as well. I might break this down into a few different parts. I think, yeah, understand that you don't have to be the best at everything. And actually the creative field in itself, there's multiple different roles within there. You can jump into strategy, which is all about ideating the big idea, understanding the consumer, and get really into the thinking behind it. You can do the creative side, obviously, whether you're a typographer, a branded designer, an illustrator, a 3D artist, and stuff like that. So you can go very hyper creative. If you're creative, but that's not your skill set, you can be an account manager as well. So you surround yourself with great creatives as well. And you help just orchestrate and manage all of that, manage relationships as well. If you're super organized as well, managing all the timings and all of that. And obviously there's the whole finance side of it as well. So they're, you know, thinking about the creative space, it's not just one thing, there's multiple different disciplines within it that you can choose. For the creatives and the people who want to be creatives, I would always advise experiment and experiment and experiment some more. Don't be afraid to reinvent yourself. Don't be afraid to explore, try different mediums, try different things. Because I think Oriel nodded towards it earlier as well. When you find your voice and you find your thing, that may come from 3 or 4 different experiments that have all come together to create something unique as well that brands and people can really buy into as well. And then for the people who want to get into leadership roles as well, you have 3 amazing examples of Black and brown people in leadership roles who are either business owners doing their own thing, doing it extremely well, who are senior at brand companies like Spotify as well. So really look at this as inspiration to really kind of push through into this industry. It's an amazing industry. It's very rewarded as well. And you can really climb the ladder and get into these senior places. Because as I said earlier, these brands, these agencies need more people who look like us, who speak like us, listen to the music we listen to, eat the rice and beans or the rice and peas that we eat as well. Because it's important that our culture, which is hyper creative as well. The industry's been starved from our talent as well. So I would encourage all of you young people to step into this career. We've made a name for ourselves, and you can do it too.
Amen. I would say let your work speak for itself. And I think there is a temptation, you know, to think that, you know, you hear it a lot. It's not what you know, it's who you know, and that is, to some degree, that is the case, right? Like, you will find people at the top of the industry who really aren't there on the merits of their talents, right? It's because they are good at the networking, right? But what beats that, I've found, is that if you are good at what you do, not just good, if you excel at what you do, and if you really focus on the craft of what you do, that beats any networking, like any of that kind of like game playing, political stuff that you do find in kind of more corporate environments. Your work can precede you and can create open doors for you, right? I'm not particularly good in a room like schmoozing and all that kind of stuff. It kind of makes me uncomfortable. I'm lucky in that I focused on my work, and that has been the thing that has opened doors for me and given me opportunities. So it can be done if you do feel like you are an introverted person by nature, right? Like, a creative career can be very successful because really your work is the thing that will create those opportunities for you. So, you know, I would say focus less on worrying too much about, you know, networking and all that kind of stuff. Focus on the craft of what you do. And if you are talented and if you're passionate about what you do, people will find you and they will create opportunities for you.
Thank you so much. So I was wondering if Idayat, if you'd like to answer the 2 previous questions, since your connection was a bit off during those.
The two, okay. Which question?
So the first thing that we went over was what's something you wish you knew before pursuing your career?
Something I wish I knew before pursuing my career was that it existed or that it was like an option. Growing up in an indigenous culture, I was born in Nigeria. So, and I came here going to public schools. We were always told like, you can't make a living off being an artist because being an artist is not considered a career. Yet like we were only given options to become a doctor, a lawyer, executive, and all these fancy high level career options. But it wasn't enforced upon us to find what it was that we were passionate about and work towards that direction. So growing up, like most people, like I loved watching TV shows and cartoons and like, you know, music videos. And for me, like I paid attention to like the details, like the colors, the storyline, and the whole appearance and everything as a whole. So if I knew that I can be a part of that creative process or create my own productions, like I would have done things differently. You know, I would have from the courses that I took in school to like the jobs that I applied for and so on, you know. After like I studied medicine and then I graduated in finance, and then I was the manager of McDonald's and then the manager of a boutique. And then it wasn't until then that I started realizing that, you know, like my friends are becoming, you know, creative directors for celebrities. Like I can do that too, you know. So that's what I wish yeah, I wish I knew.
Thank you. And the one other that you missed was what's something anyone interested in your field should be prepared for?
I would say, and Oriel was saying this, like it's not about, you know, I was gonna say networking, but he's so right. Like it's all about your work, you know, focusing on perfecting your craft because when you do that, that's when, you know, people will start, you know, noticing your work and supporting you. And yeah, so be prepared to do your research, be prepared to work hard. Reinvent yourself, like John said, and be prepared for rejection as well. But also use that rejection to propel you and, you know, make you keep going and pursue your dreams. Like, don't take no for an answer because eventually you will get that yes and you will get that support. So the most important thing is to know yourself and don't give up.
Awesome. Thank you. Now that we're all here and fully connected, we can move on to our fourth question. What has been a challenge for you in your field or career?
I'm going to go with a recent one. One of my most recent challenges is just managing a business with COVID. That's probably been the hardest part of my career so far as well. You know, working, I think within the creative space and in the creative studio, you get so used to taking for granted being able to just speak directly to people, look behind someone's screen, giving them a little bit of a pointer here and there as well, and being able to try and orchestrate that through Zoom when you're not all together in the room has been a challenge. A lot of my team are from abroad as well, so feeling a little bit more responsible for them as well, knowing that they've come from all over the world as well. So looking out for them, how they're managing their mental health through this process as well. So and then yeah, the business side of it as well, the downturn in work that came off the back of it as well, and trying to kind of make sure you stabilize everything and you get through the year and then you push on from then as well. So that's been one of the hardest things I've been able to navigate in my career.
For me, one of the challenges or challenge that I faced in my field at the very beginning was finding a community that I could be a part of, who were doing like what it is that I was doing or interested in, or whom I could relate to. And I was doing what I loved and got to meet amazing people, but I felt like something was still missing. So I was able to overcome that challenge by creating my own space where I can express myself as an artist and attract the community that I always search for. And yeah, that was the best thing that ever happened.
So I would say that my biggest challenge to date is just transitioning from being in a position where I'm kind of responsible like for the creative work. You know, I'm like on the tools, right, writing scripts or whatever, to helping others, you know, help like trying to get the best work out of other people and other teams. And that is, it's, you have to find your style, right, of directing people. Like I've been lucky that I've worked under people who you go into the office with all your work and you're really excited to show it, and they go through and basically kill everything, right? And you come out and basically you're starting again, but you're really excited and you're pumped and ready to go like even harder. And I don't know how exactly they do that. You know, it's a bit of a skill or kind of magic, but that's kind of, you know, what I'm working on is like, how do you give creative feedback, right, to creatives who, where you take it personally because we're creatives and you put a lot of yourself into your work, give creative feedback in a way that leaves people inspired and wanting to do even better, and, you know, not demotivated. So I think that's, you know, that's kind of where I'm at, is finding my style as a kind of more of a director.
Thank you. Beautiful, beautiful. Our next question is, what's something you learned about working in your creative field?
I guess I'm still on, I'm not on mute, so I could go again. Something I learned. It's probably a lot. I think you realize it's a creative job is not 9 to 5, and you know, you will, if you are a creative person, you're going to always be thinking of stuff and ideas, right? Even if you're not technically on the job, right? Even if I leave the office, it's hard to just be like, right, I'm not going to think about that thing now. And I think that is part of just life as a creative, is that your brain is always going and is looking for things to do. And if someone gives you a brief or a task, you know, you're looking at the world and you're kind of looking at it like, I could use that, or that was funny, I got to remember that. So being prepared to just always be to be comfortable with your brain always ticking over in the background, and maybe like even when you are supposed to be off and doing something very different, you're probably going to be thinking of not just work but ideas. And for me, that's okay. I know that's what happens, so I just kind of live with it. But that's what I've learned about a creative life, is that it isn't 9 to 5.
For me, what I learned about working in the creative field is that not everyone is going to like your work, and that's okay. That doesn't mean, you know, you're doing a bad job, or that doesn't mean that you suck at what you do. It just means that it's not for them. So it's up, you know, you have to find your right audience so they can receive your work the way you want them to perceive it. So yeah, that was something that I learned.
For me, it was creative block is a real thing. We all experience it, and that's okay. We won't always have the answers. But what I learned, and it took me a while, was to not suffer in silence, to not be afraid to ask for help. People around you are willing to help, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's your creative friends, as well. Speak up about it, because you just kind of go round and round in circles and you won't necessarily get to an answer as well if you just kind of suffer in silence. So speak up, don't be afraid to speak up. It goes back to what Oriel said earlier, because you find then you start to collaborate as well. And you know, whether they pull you out of that creative block or whether they give you that spark of inspiration as well, that's fine. Don't have big egos. Be willing to collaborate and share ideas and work with each other as well, because I think that's where the best work comes from, in collaboration.
Great. Thank you. And our final question is, what's a significant piece of advice you could give to youth about pursuing a creative career?
I feel like we've mentioned this, a few times, but it's important to keep saying it again. To stay true to who you are, that will help you filter what is for you and what isn't for you. Be ready to collaborate, like John just said, with other creatives. It'll help you strengthen your portfolio. It'll help you strengthen your network, because your network is your net worth, at the end of the day. And back to what I said before, know your strengths, and but don't ignore your weaknesses. Instead work towards them, and keep going, keep going and stay true to who you are. That's most important of all.
I think what you were saying about weaknesses is so true, because I think you realize that you are never finished as a creative. There is always more to learn, right? If you've mastered Photoshop, then it's like now you're moving on and there is another program to learn. Or if you're moving on from doing the work, then you're moving into helping other people do the work. There is always another stage to your creative career. So I think just being ready to always learn something. If you do feel like you have a weakness, like the beauty of I think now is that if I don't know how to do something, either in a piece of software or whatever, I'll just YouTube it and I'll watch a video, and that's kind of it, right? You can learn this stuff. You just have to be willing to do it and put in that time, because ultimately it does help you become a much more kind of rounded creative. But just being ready to always learn, and always looking for people to learn from. I think that is the best mentality to go into a creative career with. People are always willing to teach. You just have to be kind of willing to learn what they have to teach.
And that's so true, because, as a creative director, someone who puts photo shoots together, and I always had a problem with editing. Like, I always hated editing because I was never good at it. So I would just leave it up to the photographer until I took it upon myself to practice every day, and just watch how other people are editing videos, and investing in apps that, help me explore different ways to edit my pictures and my videos. And, I got so much better, and to the point where I just want to edit everything myself, so yeah.
I just want to say your work is awesome. I was checking it out earlier today. It's so cool.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you.
And I would just build on something. The guys had two awesome points, and I would build on something I said earlier. You belong here in this industry. You belong in any career that you want to do. Don't be discouraged if there's not enough people that look like you as well. Keep pursuing it. Keep pushing through. Let your work shine through. Talk through your work. And that will break down barriers, and that will break down, you'll come knocking, you'll kick down that door through your work as well. Keep doing it, push through. You are the next generation of creative leaders as well. So I would encourage you to, you'll have some hard days, you'll have some awesome days as well. But the industry will change and is changing, but you guys are going to be on the forefront of that as well, because if all of you move into the creative space as well, already there's going to be a lot more diversity, and keep pushing on through, and keep pushing on to leadership roles as well, because we're needed at the top of our creative fields, and in any category as well. I saw there was a different discipline outside creativity as well. Unfortunately, in a lot of different industries and categories, there aren't enough Black and brown people, but we need to keep pushing on through as well and change that.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Oriel and Idayat. I appreciate you all being here to answer these questions. We're now going to transition into our Q&A. So if any of our youth have any questions that they'd like to ask our panelists, if you could just raise your hand or type it in the chat, I'd be more than happy to read it out for you. So Sifta says, I'm really impressed with the amount of free information out there presently. I learned to program in the early 2010s as a kid, and it was a desert for accessible information. Right, yeah. You also feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, and ask your question. And Sipta said at Idayat, how do you feel about the recent surge in thrift culture, the gentrification of thrifting, especially since Van Clocks has a Depop where flipping thrifted clothes has become very in?
I feel like to me it's a great thing. Like every other thing, things become oversaturated, but the thrift culture, I feel like from my perspective, it promotes, for people to practice sustainability, because that's something that we stand by, making the earth a more cleaner place for us. And through fashion, by using what's already existed, we're not, we're practicing sustainability. So I feel like I wouldn't say it's gentrification. I guess people are just trying to hop on what seems like a trend, and more people are just, finding themselves through thrift fashion. That's how I found my style. That's how I, expressed myself. So yeah, I think it's a great, yeah, it's great.
Thank you, and thanks for the question, Sipta. Pilar asks, what led you towards commercial work as an artist? Are there any disadvantages to producing art in a commercial environment?
That's a great question. As I said, I started off actually as a street artist, just kind of expressing my work out in the streets of London as well, and also in New York. And it was just to kind of get that reaction to it. I think what I enjoyed about going into the more commercial space and the branding space was a love of, similar to what Oriel said earlier, but a love of athletics, things like soccer back in the UK, a love of music as well. I wanted to do music album covers. I wanted to work with some of the leading football artists as well. I wanted to get into clothing as well and see my work on clothing as well. So that's kind of what led me into the commercial space. Is there a benefit between the difference? I think there is, but there's benefits on both sides depending on which one you choose. I think the artist one, for me personally, felt a little bit more isolating because you don't necessarily get to collaborate with such a wider team. I think there are opportunities, and you see a lot more of them. You see kind of street artists start to collaborate more and form companies together. But when I was kind of growing up and getting into design, it was very much kind of a singular from an artist's point of view. And I just loved collaborating. I loved being around people and bouncing ideas around people as well.
Thanks, John. And Ida, you said, do you have an answer to that question as well? You're muted.
Yes. What was the question?
So Pilar asked, what led you towards commercial work as an artist? Are there any disadvantages to producing art in a commercial environment?
I barely, well, the only commercial work that I've ever done was working with Tommy Hilfiger and Google and The Guardian. The pros were, the pay was amazing. They took care of the workers, the artists. However, there's certain limitations of what you can do. Like I can't, most of the work I do is, with other artists, underground artists, because like that's when I can be more creative and really produce the work that I want to produce, as opposed to, but that's where, compromising comes from. If you're being hired to do the work that you're good at, then you'll deliver, so the pros of, it's been more pros than cons. So I can really speak of cons besides the fact that,
there's certain limitations when it comes to creating.
Thank you. This next question is directed to John from Jasmine. Can you expand more on your experience as an early street artist and how you started?
Yes, I can. And this will be, I think, an interesting, hopefully inspiring story as well. A story, again, of failure. Or not necessarily failure, but again, my passions came in the screen printing room. I couldn't afford to use the big plotter printers at college. I didn't have enough money. So I kind of stumbled into screen printing because I knew I could get my work as big as possible as well. And then I fell in love with the craft, the techniques, the imperfections, the textures, everything I mentioned earlier. And then, as I said, I wanted to see my work out in the world. So I would literally use my college facilities during the day and screen print hundreds and hundreds of designs onto newsprint, which is that kind of cheap paper. Newsprint is actually, if you do screen printing, that's the test paper you use, but it's also a great medium to fly poster. So I print hundreds and hundreds of my designs during the day at college, and then in the nighttime, go out all over the streets of London, strategically choosing more of the design areas and fly poster all across their different kind of walls across London. There was one story which was the break of the big moment for my career. Was I took a break about 3 a.m. at a chip shop, brought some chips. I was hungry. Next to it was a derelict building. And I did what I did. I fly posted from floor to ceiling, across all the windows, across all the doors. The next day, I got a call from Dazed and Confused magazine saying that I had fly posted all across their buildings. And it was all by chance. This was 2002. And there was I didn't have any logos on there. There was no contact details, no websites, nothing like that. And it was all by chance that a girl from my college saw me doing the screen printing and was doing an internship for Dazed and Confused, which is a magazine, which is now an online presence now. But it was a big magazine 20 years ago and still now. And she was able to give them my connection. So they said, we love what you did. We had to cut our way through the building to get into the building the next day. Can you do what you did on the outside, on the inside of the building? So they gave me an exhibition space. It was on for 3 months. And that's when I started to get my first commissions from companies as well. And that's when so I started to do commissions for record labels, a commission for Selfridges, which is a store in London doing their window displays. I got featured in more creative magazines and then started to get noticed by American companies as well. So I did about a year, I graduated, started my company with a business partner, did about a year and a half in London, and we were just a bedroom at that point. And we said, why don't we just relocate to a bedroom in New York? And that will be our office in New York. And then we grew the company from then as well. So it was a mistake. It was a derelict building, which actually sparked my career.
Thank you for that, John. So we have a lot of questions in the chat, but
And we also have a couple of people with their hands raised. So,
right. So we're gonna have Charlize ask her question first, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, everyone. My question is, once your career like really took off, what was the most major setback you experienced? Like either, I don't know, like personal or financial, and how did you deal with it and get through it?
That's a great question. I would say financial, just because at that point, I had quit my job and I started creating and, wasn't getting any income coming in. But at the time I was living with my parents. So, all I had to do was ask. and just, reached out to artists who were able to collaborate with me without worrying about, paying them or, buying the supplies that I needed. Like, I asked for help, and that's one thing that you have to be able to do, is ask for help when you need it. So yeah, that was a challenge for me, and that's how it overcame it.
I was just trying to think if I've had any like massive setback. Touch wood. I would say though, just life as a creative, particularly in advertising, is a series of like weekly setbacks in that you're presenting your work to people who are then, maybe they say we love it and we don't want to change anything. More likely they say we love it and we want to change a lot of things about it. So you're taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back a lot of the time. So I think you kind of get used to that, right? At the beginning of your career, you take it a little more personally. You take those setbacks, like we'd have a bad meeting, and then me and my creative partner would go to the pub and drink for like the whole afternoon because we were so like down. And then you realize a few years in, it's like, well, this is the job, and you can just rebound, and you can always come back with a better idea. So I think, touch wood, like I say, I've not had any, an asteroid hasn't hit my house, and hackers haven't stolen all of my money. So beyond that, I've really just, I have like daily setbacks that are not that major, but you have to kind of learn how to deal with those and not let them affect you or take them personally too much.
And I would also like to add, when it comes to like knowing your worth, and how much to charge clients. And because when you start, when people start finding you, they want to work with you, and just finding out like, what is my worth? Like, how do I charge these people? Is my price too high? Is it too low? How do I, just pricing, that was one of the struggles for me, because it's like, oh my gosh, like this, they're offering me this amount, but I know I'm worth way more. So how do I negotiate? So I had to learn negotiating skills, and, having the client meet me halfway. So all of those things are important.
I can fully relate to that point. I remember being in meetings, my tactic became, if they said yes, if they said, what's your quote? If they said yes too quickly, I knew at the next meeting I was going to charge higher. And it was pretty much, trial and error, learn as you go along as well. So for the entrepreneur, people who want to start off their own careers as well, you learn as you go along. You make mistakes, you learn from them, you come back stronger, you come back better as well.
Thank you all. We're going to take a question from the chat real quick. So Tunde asks, was there someone who pushed you to succeed?
Besides myself, because that's, the number one person you'll need to push is yourself. I can't stress that enough. But I had my parents who accepted the fact that I didn't want to be a medical student or work in finance, so they gave me all the support, whether it be financial or, my dad gave me business advice and, people of social advice. And, I had friends in my ear saying, Dee, we're so proud of you, keep going, and connecting me with people like, oh, you should work with this person. So, having that support system was what helped me throughout my whole career, and I have a wonderful partner who always supports my venture, whether she's, being my assistant or my DJ or whatever role she feels like she needs to play. So just having a great support system.
I think I've worked under some pretty demanding bosses, which at the time, was good and bad, but you work, I think you can only really become as good as the people you do work around, right? And I think that's one thing I've been very fortunate, is that I've always worked in places where, people expected a lot of me, and had pretty high standards when it came to the work that we put out. So that kind of pushing to meet a certain like level has always been pretty present throughout my career, until you get to the point where, as Idayat said, you have to push yourself, right? You have fewer and fewer people to answer to, and you have to basically do the pushing yourself, but you also have to push others as well. So yeah, I feel like I've been quite fortunate to have a string of like bosses who demanded a lot.
And I'm going to follow on from what Idayat said in terms of yourself. It starts with yourself, I think. If you encourage and push yourself, work hard, as I said earlier, explore, experiment, but it comes from yourself. I was lucky enough as well, and this might be a trick for you guys, but I found a business partner when I was still in art college as well, and we naturally just inspired each other and pushed each other. I don't know if it was more competitive, I don't know if it was just we kind of vibe very well together as well, but just naturally I always felt responsible for him, and if I wasn't 100% trying my best as well, then I was letting him down. And I think that he felt that. I found out later he felt exactly the same in when we started out as well. So we bounced off each other, we pushed each other as well. So it goes back to that same idea of collaboration as well. If you do find yourself or find someone you really vibe with as well, you know, you should always kind of keep them close as well, because you inspire each other.
Thanks, folks. We have a hand raised by Elijah O. Elijah, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Oh, sorry, I'm nervous. Hi. I have two, but I don't know if they might be the same thing. But the first one is, what in this generation do you think is different from any other generation from before? And is there things that you learned that you didn't know you didn't know that this was a good thing for you?
Technology advancement, we're in an age where there's media everywhere you go, like, everywhere you look, whether it's these devices, the phones, the moving billboards, the new apps, TikToks, and all of these things. I feel like this generation has more access to information. Growing up, we had to and I'm not that old, but still, like, I lived in an era growing up where you had to go to the library, read books, and certain informations were limited. But now, like, everything is out there. Like, you can easily go on YouTube, go on TikTok, and learn something new every day, and I feel like that's what's different. But if we allow our youth to use it in a proper way, it can be of good use, as opposed to just being distracted. It is also distractions, but we have to know how to use it. So yeah.
I will second TikTok as well, because I mean, just like talking more widely about the generation, Gen Z, I think, is my favorite generation. I'm obviously not part of it, but I do watch what you all do with a lot of admiration, because I think, millennials, maybe older millennials, and then before that, what was it, Gen X, right? Like, I think we were kind of following in a lot of traditional footsteps, in that, like, what life is supposed to be. You're supposed to have a career, you're supposed to buy a house, all that kind of stuff. And I think there is something in Gen Z where they've gone, like, to some extent at the moment, F that, and they are kind of questioning everything. And then you've had COVID, and you've had this pandemic happen right in the middle, like right at this crucial time in your lives. And I see it now, and I've spent a lot of time on TikTok, because I see and I was talking to someone, another creative director at work the other day, and I'm like, this is the most creative place I've ever seen on the internet in all the time I've been using the internet, which is 20 plus years. Like it literally appeared when I was 15 at school, and TikTok is hands down the most creative place I've seen in that whole time. And it makes me think, like, I look at it and I look at what Gen Z is doing with it, what you're creating, and I look at our industry, my industry, and I'm like, I said to this guy the other day, I was like, we are so far behind in what we produce and the way that we are creating, like doing creative work. We are so far behind what this generation is doing, and so I am learning a lot about creativity kind of from, I guess, your generation, because I think you all are doing things that like I could never write, I could never come up with. I scroll through TikTok and I'm like, how did they think of this? And I'm glad they did, but how? And so yeah, I learned a lot from Gen Z. I think you guys are approaching everything very, very differently, with a kind of sense of humor that hasn't really existed as well before. So I think that it is the most interesting thing happening. You guys are going to shape creativity and the creative industries in like a huge way. You already are, but I think once you guys get the reins fully, it's over.
And I'll just build on that just quickly. Yeah, technology. I think that's the obvious shift and the difference between my generation and your generation. But for the muralists and the artists and the illustrators out there, don't be scared of that medium. Adapt to that medium, and bring everything you learn. Again, I'm a big champion for craft. Bring that craft into that digital space as well. Because already, if you think about those processes, you're going to think about using the digital platforms in a different way as well, which is going to be unique to you and your style as well. So that's my only build.
Thank you. Okay, so we have time for one more question. I'm going to pick one in the chat that everyone can answer, or that's directed at everyone. So, Jasmine, well, how about I pick a question that we haven't heard from someone? So, Brandon Garcia asks, are there moments still where you wished you had done something you never got to do, or doubt yourself even now with your success? And what's your biggest fear when it comes to your work? We have a twofer.
Oh, biggest fear. I think maybe the first part, I don't think there are moments where I feel like I never got to do something, because if there are things I haven't done, I don't necessarily think I'm not going to be able to do them, right? I have a to-do list, but I don't ever think like, oh, I'm never going to do that, I think, so, I think that's trying not to live with regret is a good thing. Biggest fear, I think, is when you are creating work that is for the public. My biggest fear is doing something that not just that the public doesn't like, but particularly like that the Black community that does a disservice to the Black community, and I don't think that I would ever do that, but that is a fear, because right now we are being asked as Black creatives to do a lot of work that tries to capture or tries to speak for the Black community, and you're trying to take very complex issues and a community that is very diverse in thought and in its approach to things, and you're being asked as a creative to boil it down to something reasonably simple, right? So I think for me at the moment, that's a fear, is that I do a piece of work that doesn't live up to the standards of like my own community, and doesn't make them proud. So that's kind of something that is top of my mind. I mean, I don't know. Other fears is just you always kind of maybe live in fear that you've run out of ideas. I think that's maybe like the creative curse.
I was just about to say that.
It's real. It's real. That fear I've just learned is ongoing, and that it's not true. But it is also like just something you have to live with.
I'll jump in. To answer the first part of that question, which if I remember rightly, was if there's something you kind of like left on the table I haven't achieved yet. I think my goals were set so low, and I don't know whether that was because, again, looking up in the industry when I started, there weren't that many Black or brown people as well. So my success was always going to be, I never saw myself living in another country. I saw myself just being a designer, never really get into that leadership role as well. So I always set the bar low. If I was just working in the creative space, doing something creative, I felt like that was the best it was going to get. Luckily, I achieved that and then some by not actually going in and creating a space for myself and working for myself as well. And I've been able to achieve a lot, and whether it's seeing my work up in Times Square, or again, I talked about football, soccer, sorry. I got to work with a lot of the kind of my favorite soccer players out there as well. So I got to kind of tick the box there. And over the years, my goals have changed. I used to be the person doing all of the creative as well, but now I've shifted into kind of running the business mode, still have a hands in creative as well. So my goals are different. Now it's about getting a team around me and getting them to achieve their goals. So I get my kind of perks and my buzz in different ways now, not necessarily being so hands-on and creative, but seeing other people shine around me. One of my, I'll put on two fears. One of my fears is being in spaces where I never step up for the Black community. I've been lucky enough, again, I think it's because I've created safe space and created a style that comes from me as well. So it's in there. So I get to work with brands that come for that style. But being in a space where I never speak up for a Black voice, whether it's, you're not using enough Black models, or why are you always using, it's not all about the talent in there as well. It's about the people behind the cameras as well. Are there enough stylists? Are there enough Black people who are part of the production team, and never being that voice? Because if I'm in those spaces, I need to use my voice to try and make that change as well. And never, one of my biggest fears, and I'm luckily I'm forcing myself to get more involved in it, is to be a part of things like this, and not reaching out to the next generation of Black and brown creatives as well, and giving them, talking about my journey, giving them the support that I can, so that they can kind of hopefully do better than the likes of what we've been able to achieve in our careers as well, and really create more true diversity within the creative industry.
Okay. Thank you all again. That was great. For any questions that weren't answered, if it's okay with all the panelists, I'd like to put your contact information in the chat. So if any of our youth would like to reach out to you, they can. That's all. Okay, awesome. But with that, I'd like to say thank you all again for attending. It was great having you here. It's great having our youth here. I'm glad we got this chance to for you to explain your experiences to them.
Thanks for having me. Thank you all.
Thank you all. This is amazing.
Yeah, I want to echo Brandon with the utmost gratitude and appreciation. Thank y'all so much. Yeah, this was amazing. So I know our panelists are going to head out, but for all of our young people, please stay on, do not leave. Yeah, and if you can come off mute, y'all already know how we do it. Raise your left hand, raise your right hand, and clap it up for our panelists, because this was super dope. We really appreciate it. Thank y'all for making time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Extremely grateful.
All right, thank y'all.
Take care.
Jasmine's clapping.
That was good. Like, wow.